It swept 3 brats off punk's rocky streets.
I popped in the tape, and I just went, oh my God.
We were faster, we were louder, we were snottier.
They really were a grassroots phenomenon.
They're giving us cash for a record. We'll probably have enough money left over to eat burritos and pay rent for the next 2 years.
This is lame, we're gonna hear it. If nobody buys it, we're really gonna hear it, you know?
I wanted it to be one of the biggest records of all time.
In 1994, Green Day issued a Misfits manifesto in the universal language of youth.
Boy, do we have a lot of zits.
Green Day made zits cool.
Nothing's fake about it.
Music for the anti-establishment.
It was a good time for people that were normal to be famous.
People are like, you saved my life, you gave me hope.
Dookie's blitzkrieg pop reversed aging process.
It was a great record.
The rocket ship for their career.
For the 90s, it's Nevermind and Dookie.
It will influence a generation.
Everyone at our high school suddenly formed a band.
Green Day's Dookie is an ultimate album.
Welcome to paradise.
I know damn well why it was us, because we're the best band in the world, man.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once?
It was arrogant but insecure, breakneck but bubblegum. It flipped the finger to convention and smiled in the frowning face of grunge. It was Dookie, and in 1994 it made perfect sense to Generation X.
They spoke about disenfranchisement. They talked about like real feelings that kids have, and I think it clicked with the kids.
Growing up in high school, that's kind of like there's a lot of questions in your life, and you're looking for somebody that's feeling that same way.
The fact that he can point out that we're all bored and miserable and the world sucks, but make it fun at the same time is really genius.
I saw it for what it was, which is to put a little fun back into it and stop all the pomposity and seriousness.
Welcome to paradise.
3 runaway ruffians called Green Day delivered one brash anthem after another to 10 million hormonal Americans.
It was the craziest pit I've ever been in my life. They're talking to us. It's awesome!
It was to a point where I wasn't even singing the lyrics anymore.
It was a manic manual for rebellion that jocks, stoners, wallflowers, and rejects all studied intently.
It had that aura and that energy behind it, which let's rock.
Dookie's cartoonish aesthetic wrapped a tormented diary in slapstick imagery.
It's part of the message. It's part of the style of the band. It's part of the character, you know.
The album's bratty sensibility and bouncing hooks echo through a new school of post-Dookie punks. From Blink-182 to Sum 41.
You've got to think that those guys, when they were starting their band, I'm pretty certain they had Dookie. Would I be wrong? I don't think so.
To the dread of punks, Dookie stuck a safety pin on the national landscape and franchised their outcast culture in the process.
All the little stupid preppy girls were like carrying around their Green Day records, and they're like, look, I love Green Day too, oh! And I'd be like, okay, whatever, yeah, you're really punk rock.
I was struck by this feeling that a lot of the people that were at those shows were people that, if I went to high school with them, would probably kick my ass.
Dookie's unlikely mainstream conquest was cultural gold for the masses, but a spiritual violation to the defiant underground. Green Day were labeled traitors, and their pass to the land of misfits was permanently revoked.
You know what I miss? I miss seeing a really cute punk rock girl across the street and knowing that me and her could probably be friends because we're both kind of freaks.
Punk rock is anti-establishment music. So once the music crosses over and the establishment embraces it, the core community needs to backlash.
In punk, you know, people looked at the bands as really sacred objects.
You've got to decide then whether you want to just keep repeating yourself in the hope that you keep those first people interested, or whether you want to be true to yourself, which in some senses is more punk rock than anything.
Those who are jealous grow up and grow out of their petty jealousy and realize, hey, these guys deserve it. They worked hard. They were good. They are good.
We represent ourselves. We don't represent all of this, and we know that. We know it better than anybody.
When push comes to shove, it's still our lives.
I believe in Dookie. Dookie's inevitable. Dookie is forever.
Mike Dirnt, Trey Cool, and Billy Joe Armstrong grew up restless in the back-ass outskirts of Northern California. As soon as they possibly could, they bailed high school and ditched suburbia for the romance and vitality of San Francisco's East Bay.
You know, some of the toughest times we had of our lives were living in squats, you know, and not being completely unsure about what's going to happen next month, let alone next year. But that's also like part of the excitement and the funnest times of my life, for sure.
As teens, they converged in the famously radical town of Berkeley, California, where they found a cultural and musical kinship in a firebrand bastard of rock called punk. Punk bands didn't look like rock stars and couldn't play like them either. They embraced spontaneity over precision and empowered legions of latchkey kids to plug in and go.
Punk rock is about making a statement. I'm just gonna have fun, or I'm gonna be political, or I'm gonna be, you know, extremely aggressive.
If it meant being the worst and the drunkest and the most ridiculous, that's okay, because that was something.
Punk rock first arrived on American soil in 1977 as a disobedient scream from across the Atlantic. The Sex Pistols, The Clash, and Elvis Costello led a British punk invasion of political vitriol and garage-bred fury.
It was violent, you know, it was aggressive.
It was really just an underground rock and roll movement that then suddenly went huge. You know, it never really sold that many records, though, did it? I don't think, you know, people go on about 1977 being the year of punk. 1977 was the year of the Bee Gees.
Punk's initial scream was as quick as it was radical. By the 1980s, hair metal and synthetic pop pushed it into exile.
Things were about, you know, how much hairspray can you put in your hair? How tight can you get your spandex? You know, how high can you scream? How fast can you play guitar?
The 80s was like the decade that time forgot, you know, music forgot, good taste forgot.
Punk quietly survived on a network of independent record labels, determined to deliver something pure, beyond record industry propaganda.
We were so far below the radar. You know, I'd say to people, you know, that I have a punk label, and they'd say, "Punk? Isn't that dead?"
The bands were outsiders, and it was really a rebellion, or it was really something different than what the mainstream was feeding kids.
By the latter half of the 80s, the punk rock underground was flourishing nationwide. In Berkeley, the scene epicenter was a club called 924 Gilman Street.
Look, I've been heckled by the best. That's right! And you ain't the best. Neither are you!
In 1988, Green Day took root at Gilman among the gutter punks and wayward teens. Alongside scene kingpins Operation Ivy and Rancid, they celebrated the anti-lifestyle and preached the gospel of rebellion.
I played Reading, I played Woodstock, I've played to massive crowds all over the world, but that place to me will always be the biggest place to play in the world.
By 1992, Green Day had recorded 2 albums for definitive Bay Area imprint Lookout Records. As with most indies, it was a bedroom operation, run for love, not profit, where platinum meant selling 5,000 copies. But Green Day's first 2 offerings combined had sold more than 50,000.
You know, they had had such a tremendous amount of success on an indie label with really no push. I mean, we probably sent out 100, 150 copies of each record on vinyl to radio stations.
Wherever the box of records in the back of our van went, and that's about as far as we were being distributed.
Green Day stitched their aggression with a poppy and comical thread. They offered a melodic alternative to those alienated by the atonal rage of hardcore punk.
People from, different backgrounds were coming to punk clubs to see our band play. 1,000 people would show up to a, 500 or 600 person show, and the show would get shut down.
The band was nearing the underground's glass ceiling through which nothing punk had ever passed. And then in 1991, something most unexpected happened in Seattle.
Nirvana came through the door and just blew them open and put hair metal to rest where it belonged.
Nirvana's landmark, Nevermind, ushered out 80s excess with one swift stomp on the distortion pedal. Grunge was proof positive that substance and sales could coexist. Major labels dispatched their missionaries into uncharted and sometimes hostile lands, like Gilman Street.
They were running around trying to find a punk band, trying to find the perfect indie rock band that would appeal to the masses.
Every once in a while, somebody would show up and go, hey, I work for Epic, or I work for whoever.
But hey, they were picking up the check when we were out to lunch, so you can't tell them off then when you're hungry,
But the band's punk rock indifference could not deny a mounting reality.
Our band was like a foot that was growing too many toes, and trying to jam our foot in that same size sneaker wasn't going to happen anymore.